also and allow Jane and Charlotte to present. Thank you very much for your time, both of you.
Hello everybody, and yes, thank you, and thank you for that, Natalie, and thank you for asking us to be kind of involved in this. I'm Jane Whittlestone. I'm the Senior Services Manager here at Nexling and SafeLink, and we're going to be telling you about our organisation. And also with me I've got, I'll let her introduce.
Hi, so my name's Charlotte Chappell and I'm also working here at Nexling. I manage our duty team, so our triage helpline service, our crisis team, so high risk referrals, and also our group work, so things like Freedom Programme.
And it's great that we are kind of involved in this, because Nexling have been going and working in Bristol for well over 20 years. We are really embedded with the violence against women agenda from both Nexling and SafeLink, and we always kick it off on our the first day of this with our own vigil. We've done a March vigil for the last 20 years, for the last 2 years because of the dreaded COVID. We've done it virtually, but if anyone wants to look on our website, you'll see candles that are held up by a number of people, including our kind of clients and the people that we support. So this is a really, really important kind of aspect of work. What we're going to do is probably going to talk for about kind of 25-30 minutes, and then there's chance for any questions, and I think we'll put questions in the chat. At the time when we do the questions, we will take off the recording, so we are only just going to cover the recording from there. So I'm just kind of moving on to our next screen, and it's not allowing me to share it, the next page. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, I've gone too far now. The first thing we really wanted to say to you is it's a really emotive subject, talking about domestic violence and abuse, and it could be quite difficult for some of you to hear some of the things that we may talk to you about, but that's what we're here for. We want you to all kind of be respectful of each other, respectful of things that could be happening, respectful that it could be triggering for yourself or for others, and you may feel fine or need to take some time out within it all, or either of you, we'll have our contact details at the end, can give us a ring and we can talk through things with you. But you know, you need to kind of care about you and yourself kind of from here. Hope that's okay with everybody. So what we're going to do is tell you about Nexling, but what we want to say is that domestic abuse, in our view, is everyone's kind of business. We're all there, we're all working, kind of living in this world, and we should always be kind of able to listen and support and signpost people. The new Bristol Mayoral Commission came out earlier on this year, and that has very similar kind of messages in there, that it's everyone's kind of business to be looking at domestic abuse and where domestic abuse could be occurring in friends, family, workplaces, and that's a kind of a really important point that we want to emphasise. Our approach is that we kind of don't blame victims. It's not about kind of finger pointing. It can happen to anybody and everybody, and it can happen at any time in a relationship. We've had people where it's happened on the second date that they've had, or people where it's happened 25, 30 years into their relationship. But we recognise that the impact can be massive for so many people, and our priority is always to keep those people safe. And we don't expect people to always report it to the police. We encourage and support, but it's not vital. And we use a trauma-informed kind of approach where we listen and support the person in what they feel they want to be doing and want to be kind of working towards. And we really recognise there are so much kind of complexity to domestic abuse. There is coercive and controlling behaviour, and we'll talk to you about that. So we work a lot with people where they may have not had any form of violence, but they have been controlled over a number of years. So we'll talk to you about that. But at all times, we want to make sure that anybody, as adult or children, are kind of minimised in their harm and looked at the risks that we need to kind of work with them about. So I'll just tell you what we do at Nexling. So we start off, Charlotte's team, and Charlotte will talk to you a bit later about it. They start off receiving phone calls from individuals, from professionals, and from the police. and they will take those calls. We're open every day, 8:30 to 5:30, and we have been throughout the whole pandemic, and also on a Saturday morning from 9:30 till 1. And we take those calls and we talk to the person straight away, but we're looking and starting our risk assessment. It's called a domestic abuse, stalker and harassment risk assessment, and we'll explain what that means, but we often call it a DASH risk assessment. It can take quite a bit of time to kind of run through that, so where you are referring or you're with somebody, just make them aware of it. But we do it because then we know exactly where the risks are and exactly what support a person may need. And from that we can refer into our safe houses. So in Bristol we've got safe houses for women who are single, we've got safe houses for women and children, and we've also got safe houses for men across North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. We're not commissioned to provide a safe house in Bristol at the moment. We've also got safe houses for women who have complex needs, so it could be drug and alcohol, and some of those are now 24 hours. And we've now got the respite scheme where we can provide up to 6 weeks respite away from their abuse, and that's 24 hours, and that's something we're doing jointly with St Mungo's. We've also got staff that support people in the community, so they could be living still with the violent partner or the violent family member, and we can support them, or they may have left them and they still need support. We've also got staff placed in GP surgeries. We cover every GP surgery in South Gloucester and about 95% in Bristol. We've also got staff in our hospitals, so there's 2 in Southmead, there's 2 in the BRI, and there's 1 in Western General Hospital, and they will see people coming in through A&E and will support them. They're looking out for signs that it could be domestic abuse or could be attempted sort of suicide, and they will support them with what services that they need. We've also got a team, and Charlotte heads up this team so she can talk a bit further about it, that provide group work. So what we mean by that, there are certain programs that they provide. Charlotte, do you want to kind of fill in?
Yeah, definitely. So we progressed our group work offering in the years that I've been here. We started off just with freedom programs that some of you might have heard about, but we really want to make that more of a pathway for people to access, and also to think about and understand that not everyone is ready for a structured program at the very beginning of their support, but they might be ready for something a bit more soft touch. So we started running peer support, for example, which is a bit more led by the service users about what they want to discuss. We also run something called Recovery Toolkit, which follows on really nicely from Freedom Programme, and that's a bit more CBT based, so we're seeing a move towards that. It feels a bit more like the service users owning their experiences and using those methods to move forward. So really interesting weeks we run about the difference between anger and assertiveness, for example, so real great life skills for people who are no longer in those violent relationships. So yeah, so group work's really kind of developed quite a bit, so it feels like that's a great something that runs alongside our more structured services with that practical support.
And our group work, it did take, it did get reduced over COVID, but we've now got it up and running, and we host a variety of ways of people to connect into that, don't we?
Yeah, so we run some on Zoom, we've got some that are face-to-face, we've got groups that run in the evening, so there's just lots of different options at various locations throughout the city. Where there's a need, we can then look at that and try and get something in place there.
So one of our unique things as well is we offer an honour-based violence and forced marriage kind of support service. So we work along with police and other agencies, and we have specialised staff that know intricately about the issues faced in communities, and they can really support kind of women and whole families. We've had scenarios where the police have found a number of adult children in the house who've not had a chance to engage in anything outside of the home, and have been felt that they were kind of kept in that home and were being pushed down the forced marriage kind of route. And we have specialist staff that can support them around that service, and it's something we're really, really proud about, because we really do see that it is required, and the women that kind of get that we support through that service have had no other opportunity to be supported for a long, long time. Also, our role is sadly there are, and we'll tell you the numbers in a minute, there are men and women, but particularly high levels of women that are dying or seriously harmed as a result of domestic abuse. So we sit on every domestic homicide review across Bristol, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset, and it's really vital that we do that, so we can support agencies to look at what did go well, but what also didn't go well, and what learning can be developed kind of from that, and how that learning can kind of grow and move forward. And then finally, we have got additional funding from the Ministry of Justice, whose name's changed, but it always escapes me what their new name is. So we've got specialised roles across the whole of our services, as well as additional roles. So we've got a whole unique kind of offer. We've got an LGBT kind of ISFA in our SafeLink service. We've got BAME kind of workers across our Bristol service. We've got mental health support workers across all of our services. So we can kind of offer quite specialised and quite tailored domestic abuse and sexual abuse support when somebody does need it. So we work on a set definition, and I'm going to hand this over to Charlotte to tell you about this.
So the new Domestic Abuse Act kind of really solidifies that definition that you might have come across. So if you're referring people in, you probably know we talk about partner, ex-partner or family member as part of our definition. But the new Domestic Abuse Act 2021 kind of drills down in a little bit more detail. It directly names controlling or coercive behaviour, which is really, really important. And it also gives some different examples of those relationships, whereas sometimes perhaps there's those grey areas where people aren't sure. So it talks about those relationships, so where people have been together but then have separated, but they have been in that family relationship, for example. It also drills it down so that we're talking about people aged 16 or over, so recognising that young people can directly suffer that domestic violence and abuse, and that that's recognised and named. And it talks, like I said, about that personally connected. What does that mean? So we think that this is a good kind of evolution of the definition that we'll be using moving forward.
It's also good that the new domestic abuse bill really hones in on children and children being affected and children being victims in their own right. And we were really pleased to see that in there, because a lot of our work we spend kind of supporting families, but supporting kind of children in the families. We have specific family workers, and we've now got children workers that work with the children, giving the children a voice that they often haven't had, and also trying to see if we can change some of that behaviour so it doesn't go on in generations. And we also run group work for young people as well, Crush, which looks at kind of patterns of behaviour and changing those patterns of behaviour. So this is really some of the gruesome statistics that we want to kind of let you know, that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men are experience domestic abuse at some point in their lives. We find that probably 85–90% of our time is spent with women, but we do see it with men, and we do support men, as we said, in some of our areas, but there are other agencies that also support men as well. We see that 1 in 8 women will experience it in the next year. These are figures that we had pre-COVID, and we're aware that that may escalate because of COVID, and we've seen a lot of instances where COVID has been used as a form of control there. This is the one that always makes me take a big breath. So on average, 2 women are killed by their partners or ex-partners every week in England and Wales. And this is why 16 days of action is so vital when you just home in on that kind of stark statistic. And then some things about the police. The police get a call around domestic abuse every 30 seconds. So the police kind of see that. And that's when somebody says it. The police also get calls where you can activate on your phone, that somebody can press 555, and that will trigger to the police that they need kind of help, and they'll be supported. They also get people who can't speak because the incidence may be so high. So I think that that figure is grossly unreported. It's probably a lot higher. And sexual violence, we've got across the southwest, we've got about 1,760 older people who are experiencing sexual violence. So sexual violence does occur across all of our sectors, but we often forget that it can be older people that this is affected. Do you want to do this one, Charlotte?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, and as one of my teams, it's our kind of duty triage service, so that is someone who's taken that brave step to make that phone call, and we know that often that might have been 4 attempts to even lift up that handset. So we really appreciate that there's so many barriers, and those barriers might be different for different people. So I think for us as professionals, it's really important when we're working with our caseloads and our service users to kind of think a little bit about this so that we can tailor our support. So for example, we've had older women call through, perhaps who've been married for a very long time, who feel that actually they're not able to function if that marriage wasn't in place anymore. They're not sure how they may do things, so they may stay longer with that person or feel like they wouldn't ever be able to be independent. We're thinking about those kind of barriers also, especially as we look at our older populations that might rely on each other for care and support, for example. And also, if you think generationally, lots of families and marriages, you know, it's really encouraged that people stay together. So thinking about how attitudes might have changed, but that might be different for our older populations. Also, if we're then looking at people with maybe mental ill health, often we might see perpetrators use any and everything in order to keep people under their control. So they might use someone's mental health against them. So they might threaten to tell people about their mental health problems. That could be friends or families. They may threaten to discredit them or to share their information with maybe other professionals. Whatever it is, they'll use that little piece of something to keep that person firmly under their control. Also, one of our other populations is people living with learning disabilities. So they might not understand that the things that are happening to them may be abuse. And that's a really interesting point, and one that we have thought quite long and hard about. And one of our freedom programs we've designed with the community learning disabilities team specifically for women with learning disabilities. And it was really interesting because we essentially ripped the ball back up. We had to change each name of the week and bring it right kind of back to basics so that we could really think about even the language that we use, think about the speed in which we talk, and think about really helping people to understand what is abuse and using that in terminologies that they will be able to understand and then be able to maybe ask for support around if that is what they need. Also, we've worked with many people whose status has been used against them, for example. So they might be in an arranged or forced marriage. They might have come to the UK and think they're on a certain type of visa and they're not, and that might be used against them also. So thinking about all of these things that might be going on, not only people may be feeling out of control or vulnerable or embarrassed or ashamed about the things that are going on for them, and all of those are really normal reactions. They may have all of these other things going on for them as well. So it's really important, if we are worried about someone, to think about all of those barriers that we could maybe help them, lift them up a little bit, explain to them that the support is there on offer, that we've got those specialist workers, for example, or those specialist groups, so that we can really kind of sit with that person in that moment and help them to understand that there is support out there for them. Oh, and the last one on there is not being asked, and that's a really important one. You know, Jane said at the very beginning, it's everyone's business. Really similar ethos to safeguarding, isn't it? It's about having that understanding and thinking, is this something that is okay? What's going on for that person? Can I just ask them, hey, is everything okay? That's really important.
So one of the things that we get told all the time, well, why don't they just leave them? Why don't they just go? Why don't they just get out of there? Well, we really know that that isn't always possible, isn't always the answer. And actually sometimes leaving can inflame other kind of issues and other kind of factors. So we don't just work with women that need to leave or want to leave or can leave. We'll support them in whatever situation they're in. And as I said at the beginning, safety all the way through. So we have kind of some women who have a hidden bag that if and when they can leave, they'll grab that bag and go. We've got some women that'll have kind of signs for the neighbours. So if they're putting out all their white kind of washing, that's a sign that the neighbours need to come and help them. They've agreed that and arranged that. So there are lots and lots of different things. We're often working on quite tight timescales. Me and Charlotte were just a little bit late coming into the planning for this because we'd had a phone call that this person had got an hour. They'd only got an hour to talk to us. So what could we do in that hour? Well, it's getting them safe. Where do they want to go? Where do they need to go from there? We also find that housing in Bristol is in such a dire need. There's such a need for housing, and people are frightened to leave because they're fearful of becoming homeless, and they're fearful of what housing will be kind of available, and they're fearful like how they're going to be supported. One of the great things about the new Domestic Abuse Act that Charlotte mentioned earlier is that housing and assessment of housing is paramount around domestic abuse. So local authorities are frantically working on their housing allocations policy and making sure that they kind of safeguard and people faced with domestic abuse. Housing associations are equally looking at it as well, so there's lots going on around housing, and we're really pleased to say that we've been given funding to get staff, so specialist domestic violence staff that we placed in housing teams, which can help kind of support them through that housing kind of nightmare. So there'll be one based in local authorities and one supporting the housing management function in Bristol City Council. And that's amazing. I went to a meeting, a national meeting, and they've never heard of that before. So, you know, hats off to Bristol for supporting that and looking at the funding for that. We also find out that people's finances are so integral. People may have mortgages, people may have loans, people may have debts, people may kind of have joint savings. And so how you support and get your finances in place is a really, really difficult kind of factor for some people. And some people are really worried how they're going to manage financially. We have financial abuse happening in lots and lots of relationships. So the other partner taking their money, having it all paid into their bank account, not kind of supporting any decisions in the household. So financial factors are a really big kind of point that we kind of support people with. Parenting, how are you going to cope? How are you going to manage your children? How are you going to kind of like work with your children? We, in our safe houses, we have women coming in there with their children, and they can't bring everything from their home. They probably have to uproot schools. They have to leave their favourite kind of toys and teddies, and sometimes leave other supportive kind of family members because they've got to keep themselves safe. So it's a lot of factors faced with them. There's also a real denial on some people's part, or the sometimes flip side, a real hope that things will change. We often hear that, I just want them to change, I just want them to change. So we ourselves, we don't run perpetrator programs, but we can signpost people into perpetrator programs, and we do that all of the time. Is if when we're talking to somebody and they say, I think he wants to change, he recognises the behaviour, we can signpost people into perpetrator programs. Self-esteem, people feel at rock bottom when they're faced in this situation. If day after day you're made to feel worthless, you're made to feel that there's nothing kind of there for you, then how can you change and move on? And people live with it. There's something like, on average, people will have over 40 kind of different incidents before they'll even start to talk about it, never mind want to kind of change and move. There's also, are they going to be believed? Are they going to be kind of other factors kind of in place? Are they going to have guilt or shame? Is it going to be because they are a woman or because they are a man that these things are pointed at them? I think also what Charlotte said as well, immigration, are they fearful that they're going to be kicked out of the country? Are they fearful that their children are going to get taken away from them? There's a whole host of different things that come into it all. And at the end of the day, they've been in a relationship, or they've been a family member with these people. So leaving, it's a big up wrench for a lot of people, and we we support them all the way through that process. Anything more you want to add to that slide, Charlotte?
No, I think it's just important. We do get asked it all the time. So I guess, again, as professionals, it's useful to think about all of those things, isn't it? It's never just that easy. If it was just that easy, you know, there wouldn't be a need for all of the services that there are, but we know and we understand it's those pressures on everyone.
So for us, we don't work on our own. We work really openly with partners and really supportive around partners. Safeguarding is a really big part of our work. We work commonly with families in focus, with social services. We actually have staff that are placed in families in focus teams that can support. We work really closely with education, with police, with Lighthouse and support, and children's centres as well. So that's always a big part of our work. And we're also about kind of working the protocols and sharing kind of information where appropriate, but not sharing it where it's inappropriate. So where it's high risk cases or cases that we are concerned about and they're not engaging, we use the MARAC protocol, where we bring the cases forward to multi-agency meetings to discuss all angles of safety and keeping people kind of safe. We have kind of pathways that you can refer into us. But just picking up the phone, email is the kind of easiest thing to do, and we will kind of then work with you or anybody you're working with to support around domestic or sexual abuse.
And we can do that in such weird and wonderful ways. So we had a phone call the other day from someone at a different organisation who goes to their women's group. They only see them once a week and that's the safest time. So we were talking about getting a crisis worker to attend at that group. We've done similar things with GP surgeries because we know that that might be a safe place for that person to go. So we've arranged for a worker to be there at a time that was suitable for that person. So we've got that opportunity. Like Jane said, sometimes we're working in such thin margins about timing and safety. So we're happy to kind of work in those ways to make sure that we access those people that need our support.
Yeah, and even wider than that, we're having conversations with hairdressers because we know people can go there and they disclose with hairdressers, so they're signposting and referring in. People in banks often go there and they also pick up on financial abuse, so how can they kind of report that into us? Pharmacists, in kind of pubs, the Ask Angela part of that is signposting to our services. So what do we want you to do? Well, first of all, this is probably one of the most crucial things. Somebody that you're working with, somebody that you know, somebody that sometimes you just really let them know you believe them. You believe them, because one of the essence of abuse is that they're told nobody will believe you, nobody will kind of help you, nobody will kind of like work with you, nobody will want you, nobody will listen to you. So believe them. Really tell them it's not their fault. It's not their fault. Anybody can be a victim of this. I was out shopping on Sunday and this man was really shouting at this woman in a supermarket, and I just stepped over and said, "You all right, love?" She said, "No." And I said, "Do you need any help?" She said, "Yeah, can I borrow your phone?" And she rang her phone and got her dad to come and pick her up. She didn't know me from Adam. I didn't tell her what I did. I just stepped in saying, "You okay?" And I made sure that I was safe as well. I made sure that the security guard was near me, and I made sure that I'd kept myself safe. He completely disappeared, and I probably wouldn't see this kind of woman again. It wasn't the right place or the right thing to be signposting her into us, but I made sure that she could kind of feel safe for that 10 minutes she was there. And I watched from a distance as she got in a car with her dad. Just really telling everybody that support is available. We have over 200 staff kind of working on this now, and they're working really hard to support people. Yeah, opening up to somebody, it's great you've told me, come on, what can we do now? And that everyone has the right to be safe. We don't force people to leave, we don't force people, as I said, to go to the police, but what we do want to do is make sure that somebody is safe. As we said, and one of the other big factors is don't offer to mediate. If you're working with somebody, you're not meant to be the middle person mediate. We don't do that. We don't mediate between. We just keep the survivor sort of safe, and we'll support them and signpost them through court processes and through police processes, through child protection and work, but we wouldn't mediate. So our SafeLink service That supports anybody that's faced with sexual abuse. And that could be support that they may need to go to the police, to report to the police, disclosure to the police, or to go through the whole court process. And we have seen an increase in referrals, sadly, after the recent kind of murders, Sarah Everard and others, and people are kind of reporting in more to us, but it can take a long time to go through that court process. So we work with them, we kind of hold them and safeguard them throughout that kind of time and keep them strong for when they need to go to court. We work with children that may be victims of sexual abuse. We work with men, and we do have a specialist male worker. We work with women. We work with, we've got a specialist learning difficulties worker in SafeLink. We've got a mental health worker. So we can kind of offer a whole range of kind of support tailored and catered to their needs. And it doesn't have to be immediate sexual abuse, it can be kind of historical abuse, and we work a lot with people around historical abuse to the point when they can be there. We will also signpost people into specialised kind of counselling and services, but our primary role is to support them through the police and the court process. So really now, if you're really worried about anybody, seek advice. You can seek advice confidentially, can seek advice anonymously, but just talk to us. We've got this person, what would you suggest? How do we broach that conversation? Don't confront the perpetrator. That's not a role that needs to be done. The only people that we ever see to do that are the police. Get to know your local domestic abuse agency. We're Bristol based, so we are the kind of main agency that support people around domestic abuse. But if you're based in other areas, try and find out who your agency is. Know how to refer in. So we said it's phone calls, emails, they could go to the doctors, they could go to A&E. All of those are appropriate and the right direction for somebody. Have the contact numbers, and I'll put them up in a minute so that you can give them out to people. Have our leaflets. You can get our leaflets off our website, so have those available. But also be conscious that for some people, if they've got them in their bags, that could be a kind of stress for them, and the other person could see it. So talk to them discreetly about how they have that information. We often get people put things in their phone numbers. They don't put Nexling in there. We've had people put Next Directory. We've had people put Joey, who lives next door, so that then that's hidden in their phone. And I cannot emphasize making sure it's safe at all times. So here are some of the numbers. Women's Aid, that's our national body, and they can give you lots of advice, and there's lots of things on their website, and they can signpost you into our services as well. That's our telephone number. If it's immediate danger, definitely ring 999 or the lower level police 101. And that is also good, even if there's no action taken further, it's kind of logged, and the police can put markers, treat as urgent markers on properties or on addresses as well. Victim support in Bristol, they provide support to kind of male victims. That's the men's advice line. The respect for perpetrators, to get the support that we were saying around perpetrators. That's our SafeLink kind of number. It's a free phone number. And if somebody's had an immediate sexual assault, then the bridge would be the place that they could go to get all the checks that are necessary, to look at their kind of clothing or any marks or anything that's needed from there. And the bridge have a 24-hour service that they can support somebody with. And then this is SARSA, Somerset and Avon rape and assault line, and they have certain days when their lines are open for people can get that advice there. So that's us, that's our opening times, and that's kind of the end of what we've got to say. Anything more you want to add, Charlotte?
No, I think we've covered everything. Take some questions, I think.
So I think you're going to take off the